Welcome to our new podcast series, Leading into the Future. My name is Randall Palm, and I'm Vice President of Sales here at Akamai Technologies, and excited to be here as we dig deeper into a critically important topic. So why this podcast and why now? As we've now settled into somewhat of our new norm with how our organizations look and feel post-pandemic, I was struggling with leading my team in a fully remote environment, ensuring a culture that took us 20 years to build wasn't lost, and not just coping with the new norm, but leveraging it. I've been fortunate enough in my career to build some amazing relationships with prominent leaders who come from different industries, backgrounds, and knew would provide unique perspective on how they're dealing with these challenges, which led to some amazing conversations. Throughout this series, I was accompanied by my friend and colleague, Kate Prouty, CIO here at Akamai, who I've worked with for over 20 years, who brought her own experience and knowledge to these discussions. If you're a leader within your organization, which can range from an individual contributor all the way to the C-suite, I promise you will find something within these discussions that either challenges your way of thinking, reinforces it, or falls somewhere in between. On today's episode, we are excited to have Brian Shields, CIO of Fenway Sports Group and the Boston Red Sox. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the first edition of our podcast series, Leading into the Future. My name is Randall Palm, and I'm Vice President of Sales here at Akamai Technologies, where I've spent the past 2 decades leading various parts of the organization through a lot of really unbelievable highs in the lowest of the lows. Throughout this series, I'll be joined by Kate Prouty, Akamai's Executive Vice President and Chief Information Officer, as well as other IT and business leaders to gain their perspectives. And today, excited to have Brian Shield joining us for this session. So Brian is the Senior Vice President and CTO of the Boston Red Sox and Fenway Sports Management. For those that don't know, Fenway Sports Group includes the Boston Red Sox, the Pittsburgh Penguins, Liverpool FC, Nesson, RFK Racing, and a handful of other organizations. Brian's had a long and illustrious career, which by no means, Brian, am I inferring that you're old or anything else? But, lots of executive positions prior to Fenway as well, the Weather Channel, FTD, the Scudder Investments, and to name a few. Outside of this, Brian's also been a founding father. That's a big, that's fun to say. Founding father of the Boston CIO, which is part of the broader Inspire CIO organization, which now includes over 25 chapters, cities, and with over 1,200 CIOs, where he's a national chair of Inspire CIO. I've known Brian now for going on a decade, which is kind of crazy to think about, and always really appreciated his perspectives on areas like leadership, specifically in the context of always growing, learning, and engaging peers, which is really a cornerstone for the Boston CIO and Inspire CIO organization, which Kate is also a part of. So welcome, Brian and Kate.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Kate, why don't we start with you? I did a little bit of a title, right, in terms of your intro, but maybe a little bit more about you and your background. You and I have worked together for a long time, and it's been awesome to see you take on more and more, but maybe a little more about you.
Yes. So like you said, I'm the CIO here. I've been the CIO for just about 18 months, but I've worked at Akamai for almost 24 years.
Yeah.
So the predominance of my career, unlike Brian, has been here. You know, I did have jobs prior to coming to Akamai, but I've played a variety of roles within the IT organization, sort of spread my wings and have done, I think I've almost, run the gamut of all IT jobs possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really excited to be here though.
Good to see. Thank you. Brian, you want to go?
Yeah. Well, you gave a little bit of my background already, but I started off early on as sort of a software engineer and kind of worked in like product development and things. And then kind of like Kate, I got, over the years kind of picked up a lot of more responsibilities in different areas, from operations to data, to a lot of other things. And it's been an amazing ride, learned a lot during the process. And
yeah,
the Weather Channel was particularly interesting in that, like, we were just launching weather.com, and then we started doing mobile before mobile was mobile. And, how do you run a website, which, where, no one really knew how to do these things. And there's so many life lessons. And I'll tell you, one of the secrets of that life lesson was when Akamai finally came out, it was a huge boost to us, because otherwise I'm not quite sure how we would have been a global brand.
Yeah.
So anyway, so over the years, it's been great and continues to evolve, which is I think what makes our job so interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So to maybe set this up a little bit. So, obviously, COVID has changed our lives for the past, 3-4 years now. And about 2 years ago, I did a podcast called Leading Through Turbulent Times, talking to other CIOs and leaders around COVID hits, everyone's at home, buckled down. A year into it, things are starting to materialize in terms of what things might look like moving forward. But I think we were still in this turbulent time, right? Around not really knowing what was going to happen. And I think kind of what inspired me to kick this thing off was like, where are we now? Akamai, I'll let Kate speak to it more, and I'm sure that the Red Sox and Fenway Sports, we're kind of in a new norm, right? We've kind of settled into flex work, and other organizations are back at home or at work full time. And so it's kind of like, now what? Okay, things have settled, things have changed, some things more than others. And so now what do we do, right? So, I think that the focus of the conversation is kind of around that, right? So, before we get into that though, maybe I'll start with you, Kate. Last 2 or 3 years, maybe get into kind of where we were and maybe where we are today. And then we'll kind of get into where we're headed. So maybe you mind spending a little bit of time on that?
Yeah, so I think like everybody, we went entirely remote during the pandemic. So the entire workforce was working from home. And over about a year ago, I think we rolled out our big flex space initiative, which was really formalizing this idea that you could work from, the place that you felt would be the most productive for you. And so we basically came up with a couple categories of workers, some that were, you could be entirely flexible and work from home full time, or we have, a group of folks who actually do need to be present and on site in a location.
Yeah.
And so once we did that, we did a bunch of surveys and we tried to figure out kind of what do people want to do? What are they happy with? What are they dissatisfied with? And we were kind of surprised to find that the vast majority of people globally wanted to work predominantly from home, to continue to work from home. So that's, based on all of that data, that's when we rolled out FlexSpace. And so the idea behind it is, again, you can work 5 days in the office, 4 days in the office, fully remote. And so I think most of our employees are working 1 to 0 days in the office. And so it's what I am seeing though, now that people are starting to obviously get more comfortable coming out of their homes and getting in groups. I'm seeing more people kind of coming back to the office a little bit. I go in maybe once a week.
Yeah.
And it was very sparse at first. And now I think there's starting to become more of a population of people who are coming fairly regularly. And so, I don't want to preempt your question, but like where we're going next is I think we're still trying to figure that out, because the one thing that we realize is that the reason why so many people stay at Akamai for so long, I mean, Randall and I are on the call here, we've both been at the company for more than 2 decades, is the culture. I mean, it's just an incredible culture. I know I get really energized off of people and learning from people and, just being around your coworkers and learning from them. And so we're trying to figure that out, right? To continue to allow flexibility while also maintaining this amazing culture, because people who joined Akamai in the pandemic who never really, got to experience the culture that Randall and I experienced, they're missing out. And I think it's important that we try to bring that back to people. So I think that's the place where we're going to have to start to get a little bit creative about, allowing, again, people we are constantly doing pulse surveys and asking, and people are still really very happy and satisfied with the flex space structure, but we got to figure out ways to get people together.
It's funny. I bumped into Kate in the office last week, 2 weeks ago. It's probably 9:30. I said, how you doing? She's like, I had a 2-hour commute. Not great. Everybody wants to be in the office, but man, one commute in, and it's kind of a buzzkill, right? In terms of
Totally.
You really got to kind of pick your windows. If you live in a city like a Boston, like I live on both different sides of Boston, but it is kind of, I want to get in there, but man, there's a price to pay, so to speak, right, to do that. So, Brian, on your side, I mean, gosh, the Red Sox and sporting events, didn't fully, I guess they shut down for a little bit, but people were back it's funny, you go now. I think during COVID, I would say, hey, I'm not sure we're ever going to get back to going to ball games and feel comfortable. And obviously a little bit off there, right, as Fenway still sells out.
Thankfully.
Yeah. So maybe kind of same question to you and in your world, which is a little bit more kind of, people in the office, I think, right?
Yeah, so similar to Kate and you guys in many ways too. We obviously went fully remote.
Yeah.
Well, fully remote for the lion's share of resources. Kind of like any major company, we obviously have to be present, and games were held up a little bit, and then the season was shortened, and then obviously when we had a season, it was without fans.
Right.
That initial year, so that was very odd. Really for all of us, and the protocols were tricky because it was so stringent that only individuals who had to be there, had to touch the game were
Hmm.
actually kind of allowed in the ballpark. So I wasn't one of those people per se. So it was, even awkward for me, type of thing. So, but we got through it, and we learned a lot through the process, which I think is the good news. I think on the culture side, I mean, we're a little bit like you guys, I think, in that we really benefit from the fact that the Red Sox and Fenway Sports Management, a lot of people have been there for a long time, and our core teams have know one another very well and have developed those relationships. Now we've obviously added people like every company, and I think those are the ones that I kind of worry about the most, because kind of like Kate was saying, it's trying to re-indoctrinate those folks into the world of the Red Sox or in sports and things like that, and particularly when games might not have been going on, or
Yeah.
they were different and you couldn't even attend. So I'm glad we're past that phase, because I think that was a very kind of almost like awkward kind of phase. I mean, we all sort of survived and learned a lot from, like, how do we basically create this productivity enablement experiment, for all of our employees, so they could work anywhere they wanted to. And that was a rousing success, which I think gave, the technology organization a lot of credibility, from senior leadership and things, which has been great, because I think it's given us a little bit of a halo effect to kind of broaden some of the other areas that we do. But we persevered. We're currently in the office. I think most people, I don't really gauge it. I mean, our own department, I say your average person's in there about 3 days a week.
Yep.
Presently. I mean, obviously, it very much depends whether the team's in town or not, that type of thing. But by and large, I think there's a group. We try to coalesce around Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, in particular. And it's funny, just recently, like, just having been there for, like, around with other people, like, you do realize some of the benefits of being together, and it really. So there's some real benefits of this kind of hybrid model. It's just trying to find the right mix that kind of works best for your business.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point, because we built a brand new building in Cambridge that had this thing called the Aqua Mile that literally was 1 mile from top to bottom, 19 floors from top to bottom, and the whole point was you're going to go walk by, get your steps in, and meet different parts of the business that you wouldn't normally not meet. And I think my career, Kate's career, a lot of it's been built upon mentorships and career development and being able to walk the halls and see people. So you mentioned kind of that group of new to the business. Right. And I don't know, Kate, you probably know, at last Akamai, 10,000 people. How many people are new, like post COVID? It's probably in the thousands, right?
Yeah, it's quite a few.
So what do you, as you think about that, and maybe this is a little therapy session for me as I think about it and struggle with it, right? Having especially a younger demographic, right? When I was young, I went in the office, and that's where you met people. That's where you interacted. That's where you learn. How are you thinking about that with your team? Moving forward, what are the things that you're doing or you're thinking about, right? Given the fact that we will be flex space, coming to the office, I don't think we're going to get to the point where we require it, right? But it's going to be kind of optional. Are there things that you're thinking about to build a culture in a kind of this new environment?
Well, in our case, I think we do encourage, some of the new hires in particular to, be in the office as much as they can.
Yeah.
Because I think you do benefit from that camaraderie, and, looking at a little square on your screen isn't a good alternative to, going to lunch with someone and building relationships and, attending meetings and certain things. I think it's also made us kind of, operate a better business too. I think we've gotten to the point now where, like every company, I think we went through this phase where every meeting seemed like it was an hour historically, now it's like, hey, we should get together for 5 minutes, or we should do this. And so I think we kind of encourage, not just younger ones, folks, but I feel compelled that when we have new employees there, to be there more often, because I feel like it's my job to, ensure that they understand, how we operate and how we do things and how we support, internal businesses or external partners and things like that. And so I think it puts a higher premium on the quality of leadership and management, and I think, if you had managers that struggled kind of even in person, I think you need to kind of pay close attention to kind of make sure that they can operate effectively and efficiently kind of in a world where you've got a lot of remote workers, because those are different skills. And, we're a kind of company that is a little bit trust based, but I think the nature of technology is a little bit different than other divisions where you kind of know whether people are doing their jobs. It's not, whether software's getting written or, different systems are being supported. You kind of have a better sense that those things are taking place on a very, punctual basis type of thing. But nonetheless, I think a lot of it does put a higher premium on the quality of leadership. And I think when people write books about this period, the most successful companies are going to be the ones that kind of invested in their leaders.
Yeah. Kate, thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's very similar kind of mindset at Akamai. Obviously, we are spending lots of time and effort on leadership development. There is absolutely a recognition that it's really hard to, especially for new managers, to manage a team that they can't see right in front of them. And so we've had a lot of feedback on that, which is like, you can normally walk around and see what your people are doing. There's like some visual acknowledgement that they're there and they're doing their job theoretically. So we've put a huge emphasis on that, especially in that, sort of early, less experienced manager population. I know for me personally, I do a lot more. It's almost like there's actually more communication. We do a lot of small group meetings, large group meetings, one-on-one, so to your point, Brian, it is really a whole different kind of management approach, which is a lot more hands-on. I think you have to spend a lot more time with people and with teams and having conversations. The other thing that's super tricky though, is that we sort of took this whole flex space thing to heart and have been hiring people who are outside of a normal, a close radius of any headquarters. And so what we're trying to do now is create site leadership in places where we actually don't really have sites. But say, we've hired a bunch of people in Texas, in both Dallas and Austin. So we're kind of trying to create a site around people who live kind of within a certain mile radius of each other, so that we can figure out give them, ways to get together, have little meetups and things like that. So I think those are fun things. I do think we have to kind of think outside the box quite a bit, in terms of just trying to create opportunities for people to meet each other and get the culture and the experience. Obviously, we're trying to do, kind of like a quarterly, anybody who can come to the office, hang out. But yeah, it's a different world. I think we gotta get creative.
I was going to ask you, one of the areas I think we struggle in this new world, and I agree with you, there's more check-ins and things like that, and more of these kind of, at spur of the moment dialogue conversations, I think, that we're having nowadays. But I'll tell you, one of the things I've struggled with quite a bit, even with this new model, is like innovating. Like that it's, innovating via, some web product, some video solution is really, I don't know, I'm just finding it really kind of awkward and a little bit clumsy, because it's hard to get people to encourage them to participate. They have to kind of sort of look at a whiteboard, but it's not as obvious if you're sitting right in front of one and things. Have you guys struggled with that issue? I'm just curious.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think when you're in sort of like brainstorming mode, you're in the mode where you need to work with each other. The teams actually are coming together into office space. And, we try, the whiteboarding, the virtual whiteboarding. I mean, that technology is getting better. There are improvements there. We've got a couple of solutions that we're using. And, it's hard. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely hard. And it's sometimes a little bit less organic. We've created a bunch of sort of like innovation forums and just ways for people to kind of come together, encourage people to spend a percentage of their time thinking about like, sort of where are things going, a little future looking, a little forward looking. So yeah, you sort of have to create those things, rather than, I think in the past, maybe they would have been a little bit more organic.
Yeah. I found, especially during COVID, like right when it happened, that to your point, Brent, everything was an hour meeting, and everyone had all of a sudden way more meetings because everybody had more time because they weren't commuting. They felt like they had to be on everything. I think the organizations got really flat. Like you could talk to the CIO,
Yeah.
you could talk to whoever, like because they had time and they were, it was almost like there was so much support for this ecosystem that changed so much. And I almost wonder now, and I'm starting to informally do it. To your point, there's the 10-minute check-in. There's your normal kind of cadences that you do. But we just had an event where my boss pulled it together where it was 3 hours, no agenda, just come, we're going to get into a room and just with 3 or 4 key stakeholders, not a key, but like, and just think. And I'm doing 2 of those sessions this week, kind of thinking out loud around how do I go create space with not no agenda, right? But kind of a loose, but kind of differentiating the calls, differentiating what we're getting ourselves into. So don't come into that workshop with the half an hour, agenda on your mind.
Right.
So I don't know. It's funny because it seems like it's kind of happening a little bit organically, but I do wonder if that's going to be more of a, there's different types of meetings and we call them something different, or we, just to kind of get everyone's mindset. And the one that I think is the one that gets not lost, but is underutilized is that like 2 or 3 2-hour block. Just come to think, come to talk, come to. So you guys, does that make sense to you at all in terms of either organically or kind of more formally, maybe over time, is differentiating the meeting types to, drive the best outcomes?
Yeah, I think that's where things are going. I think the hard part, for us, and I suspect every company, is that as it's one thing to kind of have a model for your respective department, but we're service organizations, right?
Mhm.
And we service other departments, and they operate differently too now. And I think trying to find the right blend of be present versus remote, and some hybrids, and
Yeah.
and things like that, there's kind of the permutations get complicated because of our constituents that we're supporting and sort of the nuanced differences between them all. So I think that's sort of an area that I think that we have a pretty good cadence within our technology organization. I'm not quite sure we've figured it out all the way yet as it ripples through the rest of the businesses.
Yeah. Kate, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I would say similar to what you're doing, Randall, which is we are creating space for just,
Right.
kind of thinking, brainstorming, not really rigid, not really structured. In addition to, so we are, in addition to the, the sort of very rigid sort of offsite, here's the agenda, here's exactly what we're going to do when, and here's who's going to talk and what they're going to talk about. And so I think there's that. There's also this idea, it's been floating around about kind of creating hallway conversation time. So, just being able to join a meeting early to chat with somebody, like if there were 5 or 6 of us, to say, hey, Brian, I want to chat with you, kind of jumping into a separate room, having a quick conversation before or after a meeting. We're dabbling with the idea of this kind of late start or early end, not having like all meetings have to start and finish on a hour or half hour boundary, to again kind of maybe create opportunities for people to just have a quick chat either before or after the call. So because oftentimes it happens back when we were all together in a room, you'd leave a meeting, there'd be the meeting after the meeting, like where people either hung around in the conference room and just chatted a little bit, or so trying to create that sort of meeting after the meeting in a virtual environment.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. Do you, maybe just switching gears a little bit, do you feel like, as I think about when COVID hit, from an IT leadership perspective, certainly there was people leadership, but a lot of just getting stuff working leadership, like how do we get systems, and that kind of moved on. And I think IT leader was more important than ever. And everybody realized the importance of, systems and process and the things that got people to be able to work from home and be productive. And that kind of pivoted to, I think, IT leaders being business leaders. Right. Okay. How do we enable the business? And I think the enablement of the business was really front and center. And that was not that wasn't the case prior, but I think it really resonated. Like, gosh, we need IT to make this thing work, and it maybe I think in some cases created better relationships. Have you seen your leadership style change at all over the past 3 or 4 years? Are you more conscious of certain things? Are there things that you're doing differently as a result, and kind of thinking about how you're leading into the future, right? How are you going to, how are we learning from the past couple of years to become better or more efficient, whatever it is? So, maybe Kate, maybe I'll start this time with you on, kind of your leadership evolution, if there is? I mean, I know that there has been one, but over the past couple of years.
Yeah, you hit on something that is very near and dear to my heart, and I have a very formal initiative around it actually, which is this idea of kind of moving up that maturity spectrum from an IT perspective,
Mm,
from an organization that was, I think, meeting people's needs in in getting things done, and I think had a pretty positive impact, and I think the perception of the organization was pretty positive, but it was more sort of a service oriented approach. Kind of, we were implementing technology that our business stakeholders had in many cases already identified, or they had a strong perspective or point of view on what the technology specifically was that they wanted. And I'm trying to move us to this idea of a strategic business partner. So we are here to solve your business problems, not implement technology. We're here to enable, your business to be as effective and as efficient as you possibly can. And so let's start with the problem you're trying to solve, not the technology you think is going to solve it, which is just a different mindset. And the whole team, the whole IT organization and our stakeholders, we really need to shift the way we approach the work and how we talk, and the language we use and the process we use. So it's an effort that it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, it takes a long time, and there's a lot of structure and in governance, and really even just understanding, hey, the role of IT, getting people to be bought into it. But it's really important because, technology is moving so quickly, and because of more modern development platforms, it's pretty easy to roll out a new piece of software to solve some business problem and start marketing that around. I'm sure Brian, like me, gets a million almost really a million messages a day about some new software vendor that's out there. I mean, the security space is an absolute nightmare. It's like the list of security vendors is like 6 miles long. And so if you
hey,
don't have,
we're one of those, so to be a little bit careful.
well, of course, but but if you don't have that strategic partnership, and you don't have, you could, as an IT leader, you could get into a lot of trouble really fast with, if your stakeholders are out just sort of collecting apps and proliferating, your world could get really messy really fast, and you could be, adding risk to your business, and just creating a lot of work for you that's not very productive. So, so you hit something that's like I'm super passionate about, and I think it's definitely the evolution of the IT organization to be viewed as more of a strategic partner, and really to be part of the business and the business solutions. So,
Yeah. Well, I think I would argue COVID helped enable that a little bit more.
oh,
Yeah.
definitely. And I think Brian said at the outset of the meeting, it gave us an opportunity as IT, as people who sort of own technology for the company, to shine,
Mm,
right? Because everybody was relying on us to make
right.
sure that we could still be productive and effective, and really, we had to adapt very fast. And so I think for those who did it well, it gave you an opportunity to shine, and for the organization to look at us as leaders and partners. And so I completely agree that the pandemic really accelerated our ability to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Brian?
yeah. Well, we share very similar lives. I think in our world, it's I would use the word accelerant. It's been once you sort of survive the initial onslaught and you kind of realize that things are going to be okay. I think it's made internal leadership much more keenly aware of our budgets. Whereas so it's I think where we became much more diligent, especially during like 20 and 21, about having an incredibly rigorous retirement strategy for legacy technologies, things that you for too long probably just they weren't killing you kind of thing, so you sort of like kept them running, and we just had a very sort of focused effort on kind of eradicating those wherever we could. Much more of a move toward a cloud first mindset, which I think was COVID put a big exclamation point on the end of that. Cyber became all the more important, right? Because now your endpoints have expanded out to people's homes and things. And so suddenly, our cyber strategy had to kind of morph a little bit to kind of accommodate these things. And there's been repercussions to those. I think generally all positive, but like one of them is that as you now have developed these more personal relationships with your employees, which is good because the way it's supposed to be, it's kind of like as they deal with cyber threats in their own personal life, or, if they have, issues that come up for them, they're much more apt to call now, your organization to kind of help deal with those things, which I think is good. It's kind of forced us to kind of modernize. It's kind of forced us to, I would say very much like Kate. I think if you ask the average employee, they would probably give us pretty good marks on customer support and service and things. But I think it also became pretty apparent to us that are on the inside that it wasn't good enough, that we needed to kind of do more, that we were kind of checking the box and everything, but we kind of recognized, like Kate said, that we're not really as prepared for the future as we kind of might have thought we were. And so we kind of blew up our customer support model, and we're still putting some pieces of it back together. I think it's also for us been a bit of a reality check, at least among the technology leaders of our Fenway Sports Group, that we need to learn more from one another, and in certain cases develop best practices and things like that. So we've kind of taken a much broader look at some of the different solutions. None of us are, so like heavy with employees that we can afford to kind of have to all learn independently, right? So it's like we've definitely broadened the model to learn from one another in a much more holistic manner and things. So, and the strategic partnership that Kate mentioned, oh my gosh, I don't know where we would have been without some of our strategic partners. And I think it puts a higher premium on, that whole, that whole bifurcation of are you a vendor or strategic partner? And those two things are not the same. And the people we consider strategic partners, our best partners, we go out of our way to, share our roadmaps and everything else so that they can align and support and things like that. So I feel like it's really been a really, I wouldn't have wanted to kind of encourage this model, but now that we sort of survived it, it definitely has sort of accelerated things that would have taken much longer.
Yeah. What's the expression? Never let an event like this go to waste.
Yeah. Right.
Or something. There's a better word for event, but it does create opportunities to take a step back, to certain people step up, right? Certain vendors step up, strategic partners step up, certain individuals step up. And I do think you learn a lot about, it's like a baseball game, right? When times are tough, who steps up and who doesn't? And I think within your teams, within your organization, within the market itself, and even right now with the kind of the macroeconomic issues that we're seeing, a lot of these, startup growth companies and technology are having a really hard time because, profitability is a very different model than just, revenue growth.
Right.
And you know what, that certain ones that have great people and great technology, like I think we do, will become stronger as a result. And the ones that won't, and those are the ones who will go by the wayside or be acquired or whatever it is. I guess, a little bit, if you think about your teams, you mentioned teams and you were talking about younger leaders. What advice are you giving them right now in terms of taking this, who they are? And I think leadership is all about authenticity. You put them in the role because of certain reasons, but are there things that you're thinking about or teaching or, mentoring them on leading a team of disparate people, driving culture? And I have a couple of ideas here, but anything that younger leader, new leader on your team that you mentioned doing some programs with them, some different things. And Brian, I'll get to you as well, but what advice are you giving them?
Yeah, I mean, you really kind of nailed it when you said to be authentic. I mean, that is absolutely kind of a number one piece of advice for me, is to, be yourself. And don't try to be something that you're not just because you think it's what people are expecting of you. And don't be afraid. I think sometimes leaders take themselves too seriously, and I think it's okay to, to have fun and have a creative relationship. I think certainly you need to be comfortable learning all the time. That's what I tell my team, hey, I'm learning all the time. I'm taking on new work all the time. And you need to be humble enough to say, I don't have to be the absolute expert at everything. You need to be comfortable relying on people and their expertise and allowing those people to both flourish and fail. It's okay for people to fail. You got to give them, sort of enough room to fail, but not fail so bad that it's going to be detrimental to their career. Of course, you got to be there to catch them. And I think another big piece of advice that I give, And I think this is particularly important for women, is that you don't have to know everything about the next role that you want to take on. I think there are people who have a tendency to say, well, if I'm going to do that next job, I need to know how to do it perfectly, and I need to have, years of experience doing it and feel perfectly comfortable and confident that I can take it on. I think you need to be comfortable taking risk and doing jobs and taking on things that are way outside your comfort zone. That's the only way I think you will succeed,
Mm.
both in leadership and even personally. I think it's important to take risks and to know you can do something when you've never done it before. Have that confidence. And then, of course, it's all about surrounding yourself with really good people.
Mm.
Again, treating people with respect and, building a team that's, committed and dedicated. And, kind of like having a culture where people, your team sort of does everything that they do for each other. I
Mm.
think that's the kind of group that you want, that you're not working for yourself. You're working for the betterment of the team. And so there's a lot there, but I mean, I
Yeah.
think that those are the kinds of principles you need to keep in mind as you're sort of trying to grow up in the world, especially as a leader of people.
Yeah. I think that in the past, right, you promote someone, they're sitting right outside your office. You see them every day. It's kind of a structure and a process and a playbook, right? And I think in today's world, there's such maybe a challenge, but also an opportunity to kind of do your own, like within the structure and whatever. But there's a far more flexibility to lead maybe a little bit differently or in your own way, because you don't have that helicopter manager, not
Yeah.
not even helicopter just because you're there physically, right? Not even whether you're in there, helping them do their business or not. But I think it definitely creates more opportunity for new leaders to do things their own way, maybe without that, real playbook, and without the oversight,
Mhm.
and so hiring people with enough confidence and humility to know there's no such thing as perfect, right? So, Brian, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think I think we've taken the guardrails and we've moved them out a little bit, you
Mm.
know, internally, and given folks more latitude, both kind of within their own job and maybe some adjacencies a little bit,
Mm.
to give them a little bit more opportunity. We sent, we do a leadership training program for some of our key women's, in our organization, and I think that was very well received. I think we're and the other thing that we're encouraging folks to do is to find mentors. And I would say sometimes, especially some of our female leaders and things, that, and I don't mean, by the way, within the IT organization. I tell them all the time, not within the same department. Like, not that they can't find them, but I'm like, it's so important to get, especially for newer people too, to get sort of feedback and exposure. If you're in sales, right, like you, it's like, it's great to like chat periodically with someone who maybe he's like works in the CFO's organization, or they're in another division or something, and someone who's been there for a while, just to kind of know how the culture works, like what the culture recognizes and appreciates, and just kind of getting a better sense for kind of like how things operate, because I think it's incumbent upon maybe less senior kind of people coming to the organization, that they have to kind of like put a little bit more effort into it a little bit, because it's some things that I guess that you would
Mm.
allude to, Randall, that used to maybe happen naturally.
Mm.
Some things, I think we're looking, like Kate and I are looking for opportunities to create those things, but I think it also puts a sense of urgency with some of these newer hires to find those kinds of people and to kind of branch out. And if you've got the right culture, like I think our organizations do, where that's going to be well received. It's not going to be kind of like, why are you talking to me? I'm
Mm.
not department, type of thing. I think, I think it's going to help people grow more quickly than they might have otherwise. But again, in my mind, it's another task on the responsibility of a good leader
Yeah.
to be open to those things. And that's kind of why I think it's a little bit of a paradox. There's great opportunity, but it requires someone on point, kind of making sure that, kind of orchestrating all these things and making sure everything's kind of working the way it optimally could.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's also, I get a lot out of mentoring. I think as a leader, you like to talk to younger people because they inspire you,
Yeah.
and it's a two-way street. And I think it's important that everyone recognizes that. It's fun to talk to someone who hasn't done it and ask these questions and makes you kind of think, it's a, I haven't asked myself that one for a while.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, and Randall, I was at a SAO event one time, and I was talking about the value of mentoring, and I said, and I've got three children who are all in their 20s, and I tell them this as their own careers. I said, don't be reluctant to ask someone to be a mentor because, and I asked for a show of hands. I remember one time I'm saying like, hey, for all the CEOs out there, like raise your hand right now. Put your hand down if you ever said no to someone asking you to be a mentor. Like no one does, right?
No,
Like it's kind of like to Randall's point, like, I mean, we all feel it's flattering to be able to kind of talk to somebody else from another area, a different department, or someone who's looking for career guidance or even personal advice sometimes. And so to me, it's kind of like, I think it's one of those attributes that most people don't take enough advantage of, candidly. And I think it's kind of a lost opportunity.
When I think,
Yeah,
go ahead, Kate.
no, I was just gonna say, I totally agree. And I think it's actually our responsibility, to give back and to be a mentor because none of us got where we are alone. We relied on coaching and guidance and mentorship as well. And so I feel really strongly that it's our responsibility to give back and mentor and help as many of that next generation of leaders as you can.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's giving back. And I do think with COVID being remote, it can be difficult. Like I've never met you before. You're somebody who's on this org chart way up here. So unless the person up here says, hey, on a staff, all hands, whatever it is, or works with, your direct reports to say, listen, who are the top performers? Who are the people that we really want to, we want to help with their career development. So I think it is that two-way street because otherwise it can be, like again, I'm pick on you here for a new 22-year-old intern to reach out to you. There may be a little bit of intimidation there. It's like as much as the world is, they haven't met you, they don't know you, so really opening up the door and being really thoughtful around, hey, I'm here, I want to do it. It's part of my job is to pick, especially the top performers. I think that's it definitely is a two-way street. So, cool. Well, I think we're about out of time. Brian, Kate, it's been awesome talking to the both of you about kind of where we were, where we are, and where we're headed as I think leaders within our organizations. And hopefully, if you watch this, that you're taking away a couple things. I know I took down a couple notes while we were talking, but thanks very much for your time and your input.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. It was fun.